it takes into consideration the entire gamut of education. Most importantly, like Dr. Fauziya mentioned, this document is focusing on the teacher. The teacher is the primary focus. It talks about the kind of unique position of a teacher when it comes to implementation of education in this country. So everything in the document says makes it easy for a teacher and thereby addressing the needs for building of that entire ecosystem. So these are few of the key characteristics as mentioned in the document. Now, mind you, whatever I've been speaking about till now has all been only up to the introductory chapter in the NCF document. Out of the 628 pages, this is probably just covering the first 4 or 5. Why this is important is because when you're reading the document, you're required to keep these key characteristics in mind and read it with the spirit of these characteristics. What are they? It's goal directed. It says that there is a particular goal as defined by NEP for education, and everything in the NCF is directed towards that goal. It's practice enabling. That means that once you have gone through this document, it's easy for you to implement the curriculum. It's educationally valid. It means that there's a lot of research of philosophies from across the world, cutting edge technologies, present day requirements that have been taken into consideration and then made it valid. It's engaging. One of the key things that this policy and the document talks about is that the teacher has to be as engaged, just like what Dr. Fauziya said, and then engage the child as well. It cannot be that it's just the child who's kept engaged. It talks about improvement driving, constantly calibrating in order to become better and better. So it drives improvement. It's diversity embracing. Like I said earlier, our country has so many diverse cultures that it is important to keep all of that in mind when we are developing our curriculum. And finally, mutually reinforcing elements says that all of the above have to reinforce each other. And it's not something that I'm only going to look at engagement, I'm only going to look at diversity and inclusion. Everything has to mutually reinforce the previous characteristic. Now, this is a clearly defined vision to implementation that has been given in the approach chapter of the NCF document. Now, we start with something which is at a very high level, a macro level, which is a vision of the society as per what NEP envisions for all of us. That is broken down into what is the vision of education, and that is what is covered in the National Education Policy. The aims of school education have been derived from the vision of education, and that is addressed in the National Curricular Framework document. From the aims, we have the desirable values and dispositions, capacities and knowledge that are defined. Further, after these are defined, the curricular areas have been well defined. Finally, the culture and processes that every school should have been defined, based on which everything else stands. So whether you read it from the macro level and go down to the micro level, or you look at it as the foundation being the culture and the processes set up at a school, on top of which everything else is built, is based upon you. But it is something that is cyclical. This is something that will continue to affect every other element. Now, there's a lot of talking, and theory that we have done. This is the part where I'd like to give in some anecdotes of what we have done at Tapas, and hopefully this is something that you will kind of take away from this session. One of the first aim of school education, as per NEP's vision document and what has been converted in this NCF, is rational thought and autonomy. This talks about the knowledge which is not just very deep, but also the breadth of knowledge, which has to be cultivated through reasoning, through rational understanding, through critical thinking, through autonomy. Now, how do you develop this in children? Because very often when we talk of how the content is delivered in our classrooms, we are only giving a lot of information and we ask children to note that down. When it comes to something like project-based learning that we do at Tapas, we turn this around. We flip it entirely. For instance, if say we wanted children to learn about the concept of force and force and motion. One of the projects that they undertook was to build a car, make a prototype of a car. The question that we started off with was, how can we make a more efficient car? And this came from the children. One of the circle time discussions was about why are children getting late to come to school. So the children said there's a lot of traffic. Then we went on to discuss, if there is so much traffic, then what could be what could be the other issues coming up from traffic. And obviously, being in Bangalore, we spoke about traffic and pollution. So we said, okay, if it's such a big problem, is there a way to solve this by building a more efficient car? So we started off by looking at how can we build a more efficient car. This particular problem statement helped children to think about what can we do. So we started with, what do I know about a car? And children made a note of everything that they knew about the car, and it started with how it looked and what are the components that they could see, etc. And then they went on to what they want to learn in order to build a more efficient car. And this is where they asked questions like, what makes a car move, what makes a car safe, how can we ensure that it becomes more efficient. So getting that understanding of what makes all of these possible was in the what do I want to know column. And finally, using all this information that they got, they built prototypes of cars that were more efficient. They used solar energy, they used wind energy, they used different forms of energy. Through this whole process, they explored push and pull, something as simple as magnetism, gravity, force. All of these chapters got covered through that. So by giving children the autonomy to learn, right? By asking those questions, I think we turned the whole education around there. And today, these children talk to us like, I mean, I wish all of you would be able to come and see the kind of reasoning and the kind of autonomy the children at Tapas have. This would be very easily visible to anybody visiting us. Right? The second aim of school education is health and well-being. Health and well-being, like Swami Vivekananda would say, a healthy mind and a healthy body should be the objective of education, right? And very often we are ignoring the healthy body and we are trying to cater only to the mind. So the NCF talks about education promoting healthy minds and bodies for meaningful contributions to the society. So a lot of importance being given to mental health, to well-being, which is what even when Dr. Fauziya mentioned the Panchakoshas, there has been a focus on how the human body develops or the human mind develops, and that research has taken shape into how certain things are defined in the NCF. The third aim is democratic participation. I think this is a very, very interesting and very important or aim that has been chosen, because today children are growing up not knowing what their role is in this democracy, right? Very often we are just consumers of this democracy. We don't look at how can we contribute as citizen to this democracy. And that happens because, for instance, as simple as all of us, the favorite question that comes to our mind to ask children is what? What do you want to be when you grow up? All of us are so curious. What is this child going to do when they grow up? But at Tapas, we kind of change the question. We ask as soon as the child comes in, what problem of the world do you want to solve when you grow up? And that changes everything, right? Because they are no longer just consumers in this democracy, but they are constantly thinking about how can I contribute to making this better. What are the problems? How can I solve them? Another thing we do at Tapas is we have something called as the town hall every Wednesday. All children come together and we discuss. So there is a moderator and there is a person who records the minutes of the meeting. Children propose what are the problems that are plaguing the school, and they come up with solutions together about how to solve those problems. So we are trying to move the children away from a problem mindset to a solution mindset, and that is exactly what the growth mindset is about, right? So, and this is something that the NCF document is really focusing on. How do we build democratic participation? How do we make sure that children are growing up to be contributing citizens, right? After democratic participation is the economic participation. Now, you might have heard this in the recent maybe couple of months that India is officially the youngest country in the world. We are the youngest country in the world. Now, what does that mean? It means that we have a workforce that is being built as we speak. This workforce is going to be huge because as nations are aging, their workforce is depleting. The number of people who are earning in a country is depleting. But being the youngest country, it means that more and more people are getting added into the workforce as we speak. So what we are educating for cannot be just for the sake of getting great marks or getting your name published in a newspaper. It has to be about, are we creating a workforce that is suitable to build our economy, to create a productive economy. So that is the economic participation that the NCF is talking about. Now, cultural and social participation. Like I mentioned before, the aim of this NCF document and the way that they have brought about a pride for our own culture, our own meaningful contribution, I think this is something that is very interesting, and this is personally something that I really love about the NCF document because I remember very young when my son used to say that I don't know why that everybody likes going abroad and everybody in India thinks that anything that comes from the West is great. So we are one country which is plagued by reverse racism. And this he was saying when he was 9, 10 years old. I think we are one people, right? As a people, we look at everything that's outside as better. And so this is called reverse racism. Through the way this NCF is really fostering pride in our roots, I'm hoping that we reverse this. We become really proud of our own culture, right? So these are the aims of school education. I'm going to take a break and ask what you think are some of the aims that we just went through that left an impact on you. What are some aims that left a deep impact on you? If you can just type that in, that will be great. We've just gone through the 5 aims of education. The cultural awareness is something that you also found to be impactful. Great. The autonomy, great, okay. Anybody else who wants to answer this? The democratic participation, absolutely, yeah. Problem solving mindset, that's nice. Child centered education, yes, that absolutely. I think when you're giving the autonomy, it becomes child centric. The positive attitude, student agency, great. Once again, I think you guys are really understanding what the aims are and you're really agreeing with the aims of the national curriculum framework. So with the aims defined like this, are you able to relate back to the things that you had seen, you had mentioned about what you did not learn in your schooling but you would have liked to learn? With this kind of a shift to match these aims, I think we are going to look at a paradigm shift in terms of how education is going to look, right? Okay. Thank you so much for your responses. Health and well-being, topics that cover beyond. Okay. Great. Thank you so much for this. So about 10 years ago, when I was when I was actually attending a conference in person, and this was a conference where we, all heads of schools and people who are in very big positions in the field of education, principals and deans and all the big position holders, no? The powerful ones of schools were attending this conference. Now, a 13-year-old stage, first of all, as a 13-year-old, to talk to this kind of an audience, I thought was in itself a miracle, right? And he asked one question which has kind of struck a chord in me and which I keep repeating again and again because that's the kind of impact it left on me. He asked, 10 years ago, the kind of professions that exist today did not exist. 10 years later, the kind of professions that exist today will not exist. So, what are you really educating me for? And that was like, wow, it made so much of sense, right? So, actually, what NCF says is that education has to begin with the values and the dispositions of every child that has to be incorporated before we move into any other kind of curricular aspects of learning. And I think that this is a great move, right? Just like that 13-year-old asked, today our jobs as teachers is not to be just imparting information. It has to be about building the values and the disposition towards learning, right? So NCF talks about these 6 values and dispositions. First is the ethical and moral values. I'm not going to go into this, but then one thing I do want to mention is that do not have a moral science class where you have a story and then at the end of it you talk about the moral of the story is, because our children don't learn that way. I think today's children are learning through models. That means you and me. How we behave is how they will behave. So if we model ethical and moral values, they are going to be learning it too. Democratic values, epistemic values, positive work ethic, curiosity and wonder, pride and rootedness in India. Again, you will see that it's a very consistent manner in which the Bharatiyata is being brought into every aspect of the NCF. And this is something that I think we should be really thankful for. Right, so these are the values and dispositions that are, and I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I don't think I need to go into all of this. Probably have a few more slides, and I'm going to try and go through this a little quicker because I know that we're running out of time. After the values and dispositions, we are looking at capacity building. Because if you don't have the readiness for curricular learning, there is absolutely no way that learning will happen. And what is that readiness? What does that capacity for learning look like? One is building inquiry. Children should be able to observe, collect evidence, analysis, hypothesize, and rationalize thought, right? You have to build the capacity for doing this, which means you have to allow that to happen in the classroom. Communication, not just verbal, but written communication using different media, digital media, or any other media for effective expression and engagement across all the aims. Problem solving and reasoning. You should be able to formulate, evaluate, and implement solutions. The ones like I told you at Tapas, these are skills that they're developing as we move forward. Aesthetic and cultural capacities. You have to cultivate creativity, artistic expression, and culturally relevant skills for improved well-being and cultural participation. When we talk of art in our present curriculum, I'm sorry to say, but we are dumbing down art for the younger years. Especially in the foundation stage, we believe that children are not capable of expression, artistic expression, especially. And I hate when when we include art which is not meaningful, which is not developmentally appropriate for children. For instance, your handprints. Every preschool that I have gone to take pride in showing off children's handprints. Now, handprints have a place in the child's baby book, but not in